everyone, it's Keely here for Soy and Shea, and thank you so much for joining me for another video. We are well and truly through autumn here in Australia, and it has been one of the cooler autumns that I've known for quite a while. So I've decided that it is time that I bring out my whipped body butter. Usually I don't bring it out until the very start of winter, but because it is so much cooler and I'm feeling that my skin is starting to get dry and needing that extra hydration, I've decided to bring it out early, and I'm going to take you along as I make it. Now, if you want to get your hands on my whipped body butter recipe, come and join us over on Patreon, and you'll find it at the $5 and above levels for the next 3 months. And then after that, it'll be moving to the higher level, so you'll still be able to access the recipe if you would like it. But for now, let's go and see how I make my whipped body butter. Alright, so the first thing I am actually going to do here is measure out all of my oils and butters, and I like to melt them down all together so I can make sure that when I whip this up that every pot will get an even amount of all of these lovely oils and butters. Now for my butters, I keep it very simple and just use the Shea cocoa and mango butter. We actually don't get that many of the exotic butters here in Australia, and they're pretty much the three that are the ones that are the most common for us to get. But you can basically use any butters that you want in this mix. We are down... Oh, just need to take a little bit more out. This shea butter that I am using comes from Deluxe Shea Butter, and it is an organic one that is unrefined, which is why it has this dark colour to it. It does also have a very faint smell, which I find disappears in most products, especially once you get that fragrance oil in. So let me get the rest of my oils and butters weighed out, and then we'll pop it into the bain-marie. The last thing I am going to add in here is some vitamin E, and this is some natural vitamin E, which will help to protect these oils and butters and stop them from going rancid. So now that I've got all of that in here, I'm going to pop this onto my bain-marie and just very gently melt them down until they are just liquid. Alright, so this has pretty much almost now all melted. I do still have some chunks of cocoa butter in here, but what I'm going to do is just let this, the natural heat in these oils, melt that cocoa butter down, and then I'm going to leave this sit here until it has set back up solid. Alright, so as you can see in my pot here, all of our oils and butters have now become solid once again, and this is how I like to have them for working on the next step. Now, it didn't get quite cold enough last night for this to completely set up, so I did pop it into the fridge for about half an hour so that it could actually firm up. Now, I'm going to actually do 3 separate batches of my body butter today, so I've split out my first little bit into my mixing bowl, and into here, we're going to grab my little scales here. I am going to add the first of the fragrances that I'm going to do, and now this one is some black musk and pear. And if you've watched the soap that I made with this one, I explained that this was actually my mum's favourite fragrance, and she really likes it when I do it in this body butter. So because Mother's Day is coming up, I'm actually making this, well, it'll actually be gone by the time we see this video, but I'm actually making this batch for my mum. Into here I am also going to add in some tapioca starch. And now I'm going to pop it into my mixer here, and I'm going to whip it up until it is nice and fluffy. But before I do start whipping it up, I'm also going to add in just a little bit of colour. Now, I don't usually colour my Bath and Body moisturisers and things like that, but I do like to add that little bit of colour into the body butters. So let's get this whipped up. Alright, so I am pretty happy with how that is looking. You would have seen there that every so often I do stop my mixer and I scrape everything down, and that's just to make sure that everything is getting lots of air incorporated into it. I do have one of those special balloon whisk attachments for this blender, but I just find it doesn't do anything. I've tried it several times and it kind of just goes round in the middle and just doesn't achieve anything with aerating my mix. So I tend to always go for this metal one. I do have a plastic one of these as well, but I tend to find when you first start off with the body butter, because it is cold and those butters are quite hard, I've broken that many of the plastic attachments, and that's why I upgraded to the metal ones. And since doing that, I've not had a problem, and I still find this aerates really well. So I'm going to get all of this nice butter from off of my attachment here. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do, I have got one of my biodegradable piping bags in here. I am going to put all of this mix into my bag, and that's just going to make it so much easier and neater to put it into our jars. This is looking and smelling so good. Alright, so we've got all of that bowl scraped out. Now, what I like to do with this, I'm not going to pipe it straight away. What I'm going to do with this here is I'm going to go and pop it into the fridge for about 5 minutes. Reason being is that all of that sort of whipping motion, that would have made heat within the mixture, which has made this really soft. My hands get really, really warm, so as I'm piping this, it tends to melt in my hands, and we're sitting at about 25 degrees today as well. So just to try and combat all of that heat that has been generated in here, I'm going to pop it into the fridge for about 5 minutes, and then we'll pipe it into our containers. In the meantime, I'm going to clean out this bowl and my mixing attachment, and I'm going to start the next fragrance. Ready to start potting this up. I have already cut the end off my piping bag. I don't use any piping tips for this. I just pipe this straight into the bags. We're going to start with the black musk and pear first, because that was the one that's been in the fridge the longest. I'm going to get that squeezed down, and then I just simply pipe it into my container until I get it to the weight that I want it to be. So I don't actually use any fancy tips to do my piping with, and I've completely piped this wrong. I've piped way too much in there. I see people make all these lovely photos and they high pipe all their products, and I think, well, how does the lid go on? Because if I know if I put the lid on there, it's going to squish all out of the sides. So I'm actually going to scoop some of that back out and get it down to the actual right measurement. That's much better there. So as I was saying, I don't use any fancy piping tips. I like to just have a nice full container, and the reason being is if I pipe that in there and it sits on the shelf for a little while, eventually that piping is just going to all collapse, and then you end up with a container that looks half empty, and customers are then not very happy. So I just go with a straight cut off the bottom and pipe it in. Now, as I said, my hands do get very warm doing this, so I have to work very quickly to make sure that we get this in without it melting down. Let's get that one piped in there. Alright, so what my mum should be able to do with this big jar is actually fill up that little jar. So we're going to completely fill that one all the way up. Because I know that this one isn't going to need to go shipping or anything like that, I'm not too worried that this one is a little bit more filled than what I said I would do with that other one when I scraped it out. Alright, so both of these jars are now completely full, so I'll pop the lids on and pop them to one side, and I'll go and get the next one from out of the fridge. Alright, so we've got our next one here, and I'm just going to cut off the tip. I won't do it so big this time because these jars are a lot smaller. This one here, I will be calling this one Sugar Me Pink, and it is scented with pink sugar type. Now when you are whipping up your whipped body butter, you have to be really careful, really aware of how much to actually pipe. You are whipping air into it, so I need a bigger hole in this. By the looks of things, it's not coming out very well. Alright, so I got a slightly bigger hole, so that's going to come out a bit better. When you are whipping up your body or your whipped body butter, you need to be very aware about how much air you are incorporating into your product. Because what you want is, when you're actually packaging up your product, you should be labeling how much is in the container. Now, because you're whipping air into it, if you whip too much air in, you're not going to be able to get as much in, and if the next time you whip it up, you're not whipping it for as long, you're going to have too much product in it. So you have to be very, very aware of how much you are whipping so that you end up with the same amount each time. Right, and the last one I have got here is Peach Capri. This one smells really nice. When I'm picking my fragrances to do my body butters with, I'm also considering the fact that I've got all that cocoa butter in there, which really does influence the smell of the different fragrances. And that Peach Capri with that body butter just smells so good. So there's that one as well. So I'm going to finish getting these piped in here, and then we're going to go and grab the labels. Alright, so we are now ready to label up. I have printed these myself on a laser printer, and I use Corel Draw to do all of my printing. And I'm going to start by doing some belly bands around the base of my jar, so we'll just get that started. I like to line my stickers up, so I've got my jar laying down in front of me. I then get it all straight, and then usually I can get those to actually wrap around my jars nice and straight like so. And then to go on the top of my jars, for those that are looking down on top of them, or if I've got them in gift packs and things like that, I just have another simple sticker to go on the top like that. So when they're sitting on the shelf, you can see the name, and then if they're in gift packs, you can see it on the top like that. So let me get all of these ones labelled up. Things I like most about a whipped body butter over a moisturizer, and why I recommend them to my customers that do have sensitive skin, is because this is just pure butters and oils in there. It doesn't need a preservative, and quite often the allergies people have to bath and body products are actually to do with the preservative. So this is really nice and gentle and mild for those with sensitive skin, and super hydrating as well. So that's why I like the body butters. Now that little sticker that you saw me put on the bottom of all of the containers, because I always get asked what they are, these are my little batch date stickers. So on all of my labels, which are pretty much generic, it says to use it within a certain time of the batch date, and to see the bottom of the jar for what that one is. So there is our body butters. These two are for my mum, but these are the body butters all ready to go. I hope you have enjoyed watching how I've made the whipped body butter, and don't forget, if you want to get your hands on the recipe for this one, to come and join us over on Patreon, and you can get that full recipe at the $5 and above level for the next 3 months. So thank you so much for watching, and until the next video, I hope you have a great one, and I'll see you then. Bye.